All right. Well, hello. Good afternoon in Central Time Zone. My name's Steve Werblow. I'm with the Conservation Technology Information Center, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the latest in our series of CTIC and Farmers for Soil Health webinars. Um, CTIC is involved with supporting farmers for soil health in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and South Dakota. We've got this webinar series focused specifically on cover crops in the northern Midwest, some of the challenges and opportunities there. Um, this is part of this series that you can find at the CTIC.org website. Just look under Farmers Resources and you'll find that there. And we're going to have a great panel today to add to that. So what you'll have today, first thing is we're going to hear from Teresa Pedretti, who's CTIC's Senior Soil Health Specialist for the Farmers for Soil Health program. She'll give you a rundown on what's new with Farmers for Soil Health. There's some exciting news. Then we're going to hear from a panel of farmers and also drone applicators to give us perspective on managing cover crops in the tremendously variable weather that we have in the northern Midwest. Let's go to the next slide. So just a word about CTIC, the Conservation Technology Information Center for more than 40 years has been we like to say it's a coalition-led accelerator of the best practices, technologies, and field support driving sustainable farming practices. So we're all about trying to help farmers get the kinds of technologies and information to succeed both in terms of sustainability, both economically and environmentally. What that really means is we are a member-driven organization. We are about our members. You can see a lot of logos on the screen reflecting our membership. Let's go to the next slide, and you can see some of the partnerships that we engage in with folks in industry, government, agribusiness, policy, the nonprofit, farm conservation community, and more. So with that, you have a little bit on CTIC, and I'm going to hand it over to Teresa Pedretti, our Senior Soil Health Specialist.
Thank you, Steve. Again, my name is Teresa. I'm a certified crop advisor and senior soil health specialist here at CTIC. My primary job is leading our Farmers for Soil Health effort across South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. We do have soil health specialists in each state. And currently, we're all very excited going into our 2026 enrollment season, and I'm just going to give a quick update. Next slide. For those of you not familiar with the Farmers for Soil Health program, it is a collaborative initiative, farmer-led, to help advance the use of soil health practices, such as cover crops, backed by the major commodity groups, Soy Checkoff, Pork Checkoff, and the National Corn Growers Association. And next slide. Just to give you a broader picture, this is actually a national federally funded cover crop cost share program. So it stretches across 20 states. It has big goals to get more cover crops planted across much of the Corn Belt and eastern parts of the United States. Again, at CTIC, our team is just focused on South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Going into 2026, we just got news that all of our amendments for this upcoming year have been approved. So we will be offering 1-year contracts, $35 per acre cover crop cost share payments. We have a 2,000 acreage cap. But one big change for our program is that there's no additionality requirements. So if you've done cover crops, you are welcome to enroll. If you haven't done cover crops, you are welcome to enroll. Of course, this is federally funded, so it can't be stacked with other federally funded cost share cover crop programs, such as EQIP. And you need to follow state NRCS seeding rates and dates per state that you are in. If you're interested in getting into our queue for us to follow up with you, please scan that code. Also, with our 3-state area, we do have cover crop coaches available. So if you're new to cover crops, or if you've been doing cover crops for a while and just want to bounce ideas with other growers, we do have coaches available to help. So if you're interested in our cost share program, if you're interested in connecting with a coach, please get into our queue and we will reach out to you soon. That is all I have for updates. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Great. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Um, we're gonna start the panel discussion now. We're going to hear from each of our panelists, including we have a special guest star. At the end of the panel or the panel presentations, we'll have a Q&A. So we're live and we encourage your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A, little voice balloon with a question in it. If you don't see that, try checking in the little more, the three dots for more, see if you can find that Q&A button. Once you get that, type in your question. If you see a question that you think is especially interesting, you can upvote that. That'll float it to the top of the list, and try to make sure we answer the most popular questions first. And then if we don't have time for an answer to your question, we will do what we can to try to get you a follow-up answer after the program. So please do ask questions. And what we'll do is we'll start with Pete Kramer. So Pete Kramer farms near Gibbon, Minnesota in western Sibley County. His journey with soil health started with implementing fertilizer efficiencies through banding with strip till in 2004. Since that beginning, he added multi-species cover crops behind the combine after small grain harvest in 2006 and started no-tilling soybeans in 2013. Now, every acre has cover crops planted since the fall of 2018. Pete's been working with many farmers and is an independent crop advisor with CB Agronomics for 30 years. He's currently a member of the board with the Minnesota Soil Health Coalition and is past president of the Minnesota Independent Crop Consultants Association. Pete and his wife, Linda, were selected as Sibley County Soil Conservationists of the Year in 2012. With that, Pete, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here and talk a little bit about my operation. Initially, I wasn't going to use much for any kind of slides, but decided sometimes a picture is a good way to convey what's going on in my farm. On this slide here, um, you'll see some soybeans in the upper left-hand corner coming through on some rye. I'm going to talk a little bit about timing on how and when I kill off cover crops. But I'll get to that. As you can see there, there's a pretty good cover with the cereal rye there, a lot of dead material. So I like that in the soybean situation to help with weed control and also to give a crop like soybean with very little residue at the end of the season a head start of keeping some carbon in the system to feed the biology. On the right side, this is mainly how I plant my cover crop is right behind the combine with a drill. It comes down to establishment, getting an even cover crop and something growing across all the acres. And this is, for me, the most consistent way to do it. And it's probably only failed me once in the last 10 or 15 years. In the fall of 2024, where we had very dry conditions for the last half of the summer and the growing season and virtually no moisture. So I had very sporadic stands in the spring of 2025, um, leading to some spotty water hemp issues in the crops. And it's probably been my first year in probably a decade where I've had some weed control challenges. Lower left-hand corner on that picture, I've done a little bit of interseeding into corn, and it's worked well as far as giving you something growing as the crop's growing and have that green and growing after it combines. My survival through the winter has not been fantastic, and I've chosen to use cereal rye or something like that that'll actually make it through the winter to hold the soil in place, as in southern Minnesota, like a lot of other places, the last 3 winters have been pretty open and a lot of dirt blowing around. We can go to the next slide then. So this is a picture on one of the springs. Here I'm planting corn. You can notice I leave a skip row to where I'm going to be planting, or in the case of on soybean ground going into corn, I strip till that yet. I'm not no-tilling very many acres, some acres, but not a lot. So I'm strip tilling, and here we're looking at a fairly mature cereal rye with some heads showing already, but you could tell it's a cool spring. If it's heading already, it's probably the middle of May, and it didn't get much height because of how cool and wet it was, slowing and cloudy, so it was slowing the growth. So in a case like that, I usually like to be a couple of days behind the planter to burn off my cover crop, and that way it gives me the most time for it to wick moisture out of my system. We're generally on the wet side, and I want nice planting conditions as early as possible. Um, so yeah, on the next one here I'm planting. I'm no-tilling some soybeans into my corn stalks. You can see the twin row cereal rye in between each row there. So I do that similar whether I'm no-tilling or I'm strip tilling. And this cover crop, we're getting beans planted early. It's very short. I will probably let this grow for 2 or 3 more weeks to give me conditions like we had in the last slide or 2 slides ago, where we were um, had a lot taller, more robust residue that will last a little longer on the soil surface. Let's look at the next slide then, see what we got there. There's a spring where it was warm all spring, but we got into a rainy stretch, and this is probably one of the last few days in June. And um, I was planting where you couldn't, the rye was taller than the seed boxes on the planter. So that was pretty interesting. This is soybeans planted into this field. And when you are looking at a situation like this, a lot of headed out rye, you're at this point, you're going to be fighting not only a good kill with chemical pass, but also higher carbon to nitrogen ratios, which will slow the decomposition of the cover crop, which um, can be a good thing and could be a bad thing. If you've got a drier summer, it provides good shade to your soil, keeping your soil temps down for your microbial population. Um, if it gets really wet, it'll speed up this degradation because moisture is an important part of the equation as far as cover crops breaking down. And once you get to this point, you will probably be using a higher rate of Roundup or whatever you've chosen to burn it down. When it's smaller, like the picture previous to that, then normal rates or quart of a generic Roundup, it does really well. It's all about what you want to do. I know I've tried in this situation with a tall cover crop crimping. Actually, I only had a roller, but I tried it twice. Tried it beforehand, and it pops right back. I tried it a couple weeks when everything was brown. It popped up again. What the issue for me is, you could see it on the stand here. It starts out pretty even in the spring growing, but it doesn't mature at the same height with nice stalk length and rigidity in the stem to really crimp to give a good solid weed control, well, not weed control, but cover crop control or termination of that with a crimper due to the cooler nature of being this far north. So that's so I've relied heavily on chemicals for termination unless it's a winter a crop that does not overwinter, a cover crop. Um, Anything else do we want I wanted to touch on? Now, obviously, when we get into a situation, and I've seen that once, is I always monitor the forecast. If it looks like it's going to turn hot and dry, termination earlier is on my mind. I don't want to get into the situation where it's terminated and shady and then we turn wet before I have it planted. So I err on the side of letting it grow longer. And about the only time that's hurt me is they're talking rain coming in early May, and we got a Mother's Day weekend rain of 10 inches of rain. And I thought, well, I'm super happy my cover crop's still growing. I had a lot of corn in, not much soybeans. But we went from that to a forecast overnight or a couple of days where they said 85 to 95 degrees for 3 weeks straight with 20 to 35-mile-an-hour winds. And by the time I could get across the field and get my cover crop sprayed, by the time it actually died, it really dried out the soil profile. So we went from one extreme of 10 inches of rain to super hot and dry with the average humidity in the low 20s. And that's a risk you have going with that. So with that, I think I'm gonna let it go for now, and I always can answer any questions later on.
Thanks, Pete. That was fascinating and exactly what we're trying to accomplish, getting some real world perspectives on how to deal with the conditions in the Northern Corn Belt. So we'll have a chance to ask Pete some questions. I see Mark has already found the Q&A, and I encourage other folks to do the same. Now we're going to hear from CTIC's own Justin Jelsma. Justin grew up in southeast South Dakota on a diverse farm with row crop and livestock, where he bought his first 2 cows. He then went on to receive his bachelor's degree from South Dakota State University. Justin has experience in the feed, animal nutrition, seed, and chemicals industries, and he's also CTIC's soil health specialist for the Farmers for Soil Health program in South Dakota. Justin found his love for conservation while hunting the South Dakota prairie, seeing the direct correlation between farming practices and habitat for wildlife. Utilizing no-till with cover crops and planted green are some of the practices he brought into his family farm operation, while also implementing different grazing practices with his cattle. Currently, Justin lives in Springfield, South Dakota, along the Missouri River with his wife, Cassie, son, and daughter. So, Justin, look forward to hearing about what you're doing on your place.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate being here. Like Steve said, I'm the soil health specialist for Farmers for Soil Health, but I also farm. That's how I ended up at CTIC. This slide just shows Springfield, South Dakota, so we're right on the Missouri River breaks. That's kind of gives you a location right on the Nebraska state line there. Next slide. So this is a picture, just kind of a good reminder for me that I took January 2026 this year. Very windy day. We had 60-mile-an-hour gusts coming off of a neighbor's field that had tilled. Just a reminder, like I said, let's try and keep everything where it needs to be and try and keep that soil in place with living roots and cover. Next slide. So this is the beginning. So this is, we take corn pictures every year with my kids. This was the beginning of the rye, 2017. Didn't actually plant into this rye. We chopped this off. And you can see it's very mature. It wasn't the plan, but it was a very wet spring. Ended up getting it chopped off. We did plant beans into this field and ended up combining 40 bushel beans off of this field. Where we're located at, that doesn't generally happen. It just happened to be a wet year, and the corn on the left there kind of represents a good corn year. That corn looks really good for our area. So this is the current system. What we're doing is planting about a bushel, 60 pounds of rye, 7.5-inch spacing with 1590 no-till drill. Plant the soybeans, about 60 pounds of those with the same drill at the same spacing. Termination, generally we try just to spray glyphosate. We will add dual 2 depending on how much ground cover we receive, depending on the maturity of the rye. And just depending on spring moisture as well with the termination. Post-spray, we try to get by with 1 post-spray of Extends Flex with Liberty. And then we do add a product called Boost for molasses. It seems to help kill the weeds better, and it also brings up the Brix and the sugars in the soybean plant. The system cost down there, it kind of goes through them. So you can kind of see that this was prices from last year, kind of what things cost for each deal. So it's $164 for the total cost of that's what it cost last year for our system. So this is kind of the pros and cons. In our operation, you get weed suppression, decrease chemical use, increase your organic matter. You can conserve some moisture by using these cover crops if you manage them correctly. We do have livestock integration, so we've got grazing opportunities. Some of the cons are you're chasing the combine in the fall, so you've got an extra pass there, and it's a busy time of year trying to get cover crops planted and get everything out of the field and get done before winter hits. Like on a wet year, kind of like what Pete was saying, is that rye can get ahead of you if it's too wet and you can't get it terminated. It can be tough to terminate. You can run into some planting difficulties if it gets too thick. With emergence issues from the soybeans, they will fill in, and also you can cause accidents on highways. I've had calls of people seeing me do this. People stop out in the field, just wondering what the heck you're doing. People stop and take pictures. So always a good conversation. So this just kind of shows some of the system extremes. The picture on the right is just rye just barely coming in. Probably looking more like that situation on the right this year compared to on the left, where the rye did get too mature. So we'll probably end up having to use a pre-emerge a little bit more this year, because we will be able to see the ground, being as we are in a kind of a drought situation here. This slide just shows, we can, the flexibility to livestock integration. We can utilize the rye for feed some years. If it's coming good, we will graze next to some pastures, just trying to let our pastures sit a little bit longer, let them grow, more feed opportunities. And then we'll come back, take the cattle off and come back in and maybe plant a shorter season soybean. But it is flexible, and we are able to utilize some of the benefits of rye, and also get a little bit of extra manure out and saliva and stuff like that by implementing the cattle. So this is obviously our goal. Hoping to shade in the rows around 60 days on an average year. Obviously, it doesn't always happen that way, but that's obviously the goal, and what we're looking for is to try and get those 7.5-inch rows shade in the row and keep weed suppression down. Yeah, just looking ahead. Don't have a roller crimper yet. Have looked into possibly mounting a roller crimper on the front of the tractor, as the picture seen here. Otherwise, have looked at a pull type, like a 30-foot roller crimper, trying to crimp the rye and eliminate a little more chemical, and maybe be able to do it a little more timely on our own, and just utilize that. But as far as the cost, I haven't been able to pencil that out yet, so we haven't brought that in, but it's definitely something we're looking at. And then, this is my final slide. So just a work in progress. On the right, you can see that shows the corn crop for this year and where the kids are at. I'm still working on these kids and everything like that. But just want to say that everybody's operation, I know, is different, and this system might not work for you or in other places, but everybody's got their own uniqueness and challenges too, I understand. But this has been working for us, and this is what we've been doing, and we'll see how it goes moving on into the future.
It's great. Thanks, Justin. And the crops look great, but the kids look even greater. That's just that's lovely to see. Thanks for sharing that. Now we're going to hear a little bit of a different take. We talked a little bit, Pete mentioned that 10-inch rainfall and the trouble getting into the field. I think our next guest may have some thoughts on that. So we've got a twofer today. So we've got business partners from Aerial Agritech in Wisconsin, Trevor Rufledt and Ryan Beyer. Trevor grew up in northwestern Wisconsin, started Aerial Agritech in 2024, and gained a business partner this year. He's been a journeyman electrician with the same company for 9 years. His focus is modernizing agriculture through drone technology. He operates agricultural drones to provide efficient crop spraying and cover crop applications across the Midwest, working closely with farmers and land managers to introduce precision aerial applications that save time, reduce crop damage, and improve field accessibility in challenging conditions. Trevor and his wife have 2 daughters. Now, we mentioned that business partner. Here's Ryan Beyer. He's a lifelong resident of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and the founder of Precision Drone Recovery, LLC, along with being a principal partner in Aerial Agritech, LLC. Deeply rooted in the community where he's born and raised, his career is driven by a passion for the Wisconsin landscape and the people who work it. Outside of the professional arena, Ryan's life is centered around family and the great outdoors. He's a dedicated husband to Justine and a proud father to Brooks and Maya. An avid sportsman, he spends his time hunting, fishing, and exploring the woods and waters of northern Wisconsin. We thought it would be interesting to get their take on basically a new set of tools that may be able to help, particularly in the northern Midwest, where wet springs are, shall we say, not uncommon. So, guys, I'll leave it to you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
So today, we're just going to show everyone another tool that they can add to their arsenal to get cover crops on or terminating done when the timing's right or the weather doesn't cooperate. So we all know how fast fall closes in on everybody. One rain and the fields can stay wet longer than we can afford. By the time the corn comes off in the fall, sometimes the ideal cover crop window is already gone. The biggest issue we see in our area isn't the willingness to plant the cover crops, it's the timing. So, and that's where the drones can help with that. Next slide. So every extra trip across that field in a wet fall creates compaction, especially on our heavier ground. You know, even that one fall pass can show up on next year's yield. A drone removes that pass. Compaction is one of the most expensive invisible problems in agriculture. It reduces root growth, water infiltration, stuff like that. And, you know, sometimes the biggest return is simply just not losing yield. This is where the drone fits, right? I mean, it obviously seeds from the air. There's no tires, no roots, no crop damage. Right now, if the combine can't get in, you know, we can. And if you want it on ahead of harvest, you know, corn's still standing and we can fly it on and not run anything over. So this is the newest DJI Agris T100 drone. It's not a hobby drone. It's built specifically for ag applications. With our specific setup, we have 2 T100s, deck over trailer. So, you know, we're above everything, quick in and outs. We're not tearing stuff down. It has accurate rate control, consistent spread patterns, RTK mapping. So you can get within 1 to 3 centimeters. So you're not overlapping or missing parts of the field. With that average swath width being 35 feet, you can change that based upon the conditions. So, you know, we can shorten it up, or it does go up to 42 feet too. But that comes with, you know, like perfect situations that you're going to go that far out. 40 to 70 acres per hour, depending on field size. So it's kind of a beast. Next slide. So when you compare this to running equipment in them wet conditions, paying labor, risking compaction, crop loss, the numbers, you know, make sense. The biggest return on investment comes from getting the cover established earlier before the frost hits. And with earlier establishment, comes stronger growth. The main reason, we decided to do this year, our application services being offered through dealers, is because we're not crop advisors, we're not agronomists, we're not consultants. We're applicators. We know how to run our drones efficiently. So that local support team will ensure us, when the timing is right, to get that on or get it terminated. And that relationship locally, goes better than coming from someone like us. So if this is something you're interested in, you definitely can reach out, and I can get in touch with your local dealer, and we can go from there. This one.
Yeah, so like Trevor had mentioned, it's definitely new technology. We see it only going further and further in the future and growing as drones start to become more popular. If this is something that you would like to do, we definitely offer testing applications. We've done quite a few of those as well, and we don't have to do every single acre that you have, but you can compare the results to the year before or prior to what we do when we can come in, either terminate or put the seed down as well. We do offer early booking as well for discounts if that's something that you're looking forward to doing in the future. So obviously the earlier you can get on our schedule and get locked in, the better timing we can have for you to make sure that we're there, and we don't have to turn anybody away.
So
right.
if you guys, you want to go ahead, Steve?
No, go for it. Go for it, Trevor.
Okay, so this is like one of the main questions we get on demos or field days or webinars. Where can I buy my own drone? We work with American Drone. They're out of Marshfield. Really good guys. I can get you in contact with them if you are interested in buying your own drone. I just stress, make sure it fits your operation, right? I mean, some of these drones are, they make all different kinds of them, but that's a rabbit hole we could go down that be here all day, but just make sure it fits your operation. And if you are looking to hire somebody, just make sure that they have their 107, and the 107 is their license to fly that drone commercially. And then their FAA Part 137 allows them to, I guess, easy said, is spread seed. But then you get into like the terminating side where you need your state license and insurance. And we just know some people around us that don't have that stuff. And, I don't want anything bad or people to get a bad name for not following the rules. So we just stress that you make sure that they have these things before they do work for you.
Outstanding. Thanks a lot, Trevor and Ryan. And now we've got an opportunity for questions and answers. And Teresa, we would love to keep you in this conversation as well. Use that CCA and soil health experience of yours, your seed industry experience, to share your insight as well. So if you'd stick around, we'll open up the questions and answers. Again, down the bottom of the screen, there should be a little Q&A voice balloon with a question mark, and you can add your questions. We've got a couple right now. The first one's for Mark. He's asking, from a chemicals and timing perspective, how do you terminate red clover in the spring? I know we talked mostly about cereal rye, but who wants to tackle some tips on red clover?
Steve, I can handle that.
Super. Thanks, Steve.
As I'm looking at seeding red clover with my oats and having that as a growing cover crop at harvest time already. When I harvest my oats, I've kind of looked into this already. It's very similar to terminating alfalfa in the spring. It's basically you want to mix with glyphosate and like a pint of 2,4-D or Banville. So those three are pretty good on it. You each alone, is probably not going to give you 100% control, but if you just throw glyphosate in with the dicamba or with the 2,4-D, um, Stinger's another option too. Um, but and that's in a lot of post-emerge products, so I'd probably let that clean that up in your post-emerge and do your burn down with either the Banville, 5 to 7 days ahead of planting, or a couple of days after the seed's in the ground before the crop's up.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. Justin, did you have anything to add? I saw you pop on, and let's keep our faces on. This is it's a good time to see some smiling faces.
No, that's probably more. Peter's got more experience, obviously, with that. I don't have much experience with the clovers.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you. Anyone else on red clover? All right. We've got another question. Chelsea's asking, how much per acre? So, Chelsea, I'm going to assume you're talking about the drone application. So, guys, do you want to? Yep, she says yes. So, yeah, can you run down that price chart again that you were sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have it's off of field size. So if your field is anywhere from 0 to 15 acres, it's going to be $20 an acre. And then that trickles down, 15 to 50 is 19, 50 to 100 acres is $18 an acre. And then 100 plus is 17, because, a lot of them smaller 10, 5-acre fields, you're moving a lot, and it chews up that hourly, amount of acres you can get done.
That makes sense. Are there things that growers can do while we've got you in the hot seat? Are there things growers can do to optimize the situation for drone seeding or drone spraying? Is there any way they can kind of help set up to make your job easier and more efficient?
I mean, if it'd be a big job where, we have 1,000-gallon clear water tank on our trailer. So if it's going to be a job where, it is a bunch of large fields, they did testing with these last fall, and at a minimum, they were doing 500 acres a day, right? And then at a most, they're doing with one drone. So, and at most, they're doing 700. So with two, we're going to do 1,500 acres a day, 1,400 acres a day. So, something that would benefit us would probably be like transporting water on a day like that. Because travel, if we're in Minnesota or Iowa or somewhere different, we don't have someone to follow us around with a water tank, tank truck or something like that. So I guess just that, with this new auger system for seeding, before we had the T40s, it was all gravity fed. So any dirty rye or anything like that, that would plug up the hopper. So then you'd have to watch your rate. You bring it back, you clean it all out. But now it's a big auger system, so it helps break that stuff up and then pretty much forces it out regardless. So, but clean product definitely helps out a lot.
Having maps ready as well, so we can get them fields RTK mapped faster and more efficiently as well. And we're going to be implementing what's called drone logbooks, where growers will be able to log in and upload those images before we even get to their fields and have that already done for us. So that's going to be a lot more efficient in the future coming up during the season.
So they just give you the polygon or the map and you pop it in?
Yeah, and that just transfers right to our drones and the controllers itself. And we can take right off as soon as we get there, instead of having to physically map the field once we're there each time.
That's great. Now, is there a specific mapping software, or does it work with all the major ones?
You can import fields from like John Deere and stuff like that. Cool. We just sat in on a class on Saturday. When they run that field, it's to the fence line, right? Well, yeah, they can plant, but sometimes in first 4 or 5 rows are underneath some overhanging trees or stuff like that. So you can implement stuff like that, but a lot of the times it's nice, just to get a good look when we get there. If we map it prior to getting there, it's like, okay, well, it looks like the satellite image did. But if it doesn't, then we can fly around the field and map it that way too, and know where them trees overhang and stuff like that.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about Farmers for Soil Health and the benefits there. So, Justin, you were talking about the cost of cover crops, and of course, everybody right now is talking about the cost of inputs in general. How does I guess the stipend or the incentive from Farmers for Soil Health kind of take some of the bite out of that? And is there anything else folks can stack with it that's not a federal program that may be permissible? And so, Justin and Teresa, this seems like it falls right into your bailiwicks.
Yeah, it'll definitely help. If guys aren't in an EQIP program or a CSP, kind of bridge them in between that, especially with the economic times that we're in right now with the price of commodities and price of inputs and everything. And then just utilizing the cover crops. Like Teresa said, $35 an acre, 1-year contract. So should, depending on what you're planting, I mean, if we're doing rye, that should cover a lot of seed costs and application. It's not going to cover everything, but it definitely helps. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Teresa.
There are a lot of county or state programs or privately funded programs out there that may be stackable. In each case, we would just have to check on who the funding is coming through. Sometimes state programs can't be stacked, sometimes they can. So more so on the state level, some of those can, some of those can't. There are cost share programs out there that are backed by companies like Pepsi. Those are privately funded, so those are stackable. So you could potentially stack the 35 with other programs to get a higher rate. And like Justin said, if you're doing something like winter rye, it should cover a good chunk of your costs. But if you're getting more species, doing a multi-species mix, those tend to cost more. You might want to look into stacking with other funds if you need funding.
That makes sense. That's great. And every dime counts right now.
Steve,
So
can I jump in there?
well, yeah, sure, you bet.
So there's so much focus on trying to cover the cost of the cover crop seed and the drilling. Obviously, that's a real number, and you have to pay that. But if you're coming from a system where you're pulling a disc ripper or chisel plow across there and another field cultivator pass, those savings, cover crops is a third or half of that cost. And if that helps you transition to less tillage, that's another way to justify that cost.
That's true, and we're really drilling into the cost side, but we're not even starting to talk about the benefits, and both short term and long term. And you mentioned your weed control program. So did I get right, Pete, that you were saying that with the exception of the tough water hemp year, where you had that dry seeding conditions for your cover crop, beyond that, you're not doing a whole heck of a lot of herbicide in the average year? Am I getting that right?
Well, it hasn't eliminated it, but Justin alluded to this in his portion there. It does take away the need for an early season residual control. If you can drop that cost out, that's another benefit or cost savings to help pay for the cover crop seed. Um, so I'm looking at, other than killing off the cover crop, using your post-emerged application as kind of the next step. There's really, you get a good stand, not a high need. Um, for a to control weed like water hemp. Water hemp is probably our biggest concern in our area here, southern Minnesota, and it has kind of diminished on my farm as far as um, how much, how easy or how hard it is to control because of the cover crops, shading it out and keeping it from emergence, at least at a heavy density.
That's outstanding. Now, we were talking about seed and seed mixture. We've got a question from Anonymous. What seed or seed mixtures are you able to seed with the drones? You mentioned cereal rye, and you mentioned the fact that you had the gravity fed, you have now the auger fed. Does that matter, and does that limit or create opportunities for different seed mixes?
Um, it doesn't really add any more opportunities because the general uh, plan is still the same. We'll get that mixture when we show up. If it's a mixture we don't already have pre-programmed, and the way that works is you put 50 pounds or 60 pounds of that mixture in the drone. You take the spreader off, you hit calibrate, and it just opens that seeder different amounts to know how the flow is coming, so it can adjust that. The faster we go, the more the doors open, or the slower. So there is really no limit on what seed we can seed with it.
Awesome. Um, Pete, I wanted to go back to something you were talking about. You mentioned the idea of letting your cereal rye grow up some. You showed us a picture of fairly short cereal rye, said you'd let it grow some more after seeding soybeans. Do you get any kind of adverse effect from shading or any like allelopathy from your cover crops on the cash crop to follow? And if you do, how do you manage that, or how do you cut off before you run into that kind of problem?
So those are good questions, Steve. I mean, the University of Wisconsin has a pretty thorough study out on that. And for them, the more biomass they get, the taller it gets, the bigger yield penalty they're seeing in their soybeans. Now, I'm just going off of a couple of years. And one of them was the year it really took off. I had 6 foot tall cereal rye by the time I got it sprayed. And I really did not see the top of my soybean rows from the road until about the middle of July. So I did not do anything to shorten it up in any way as far as like did try rolling it at two different timings and had very little success. It stood back up on me. But I had strips out in the field that year of no cover and cover crop, which ended up being 6+ feet tall. And my soybean yield was within a bushel of each other. And it depended on what side, I had like 3 or 4 of these across the field. And one time the soybeans with no covers would be a bushel better or a bushel and a half. And the other time the cereal rye would. And we're talking a lot of biomass, a lot of height, a lot of shading. In corn, I think it's a lot more critical to try and do something with it, not let it get tall, because shading is a real thing as far as corn and how it's going to mature, how fast it's going to go, and things like that. And yet, I had a year where at the seedling stage, I got the corn in, but I didn't spray the cereal rye until it dried out after that rain. And corn looked challenged. It looked stressed. Uh, Good timing of rain in August, and I had the best corn crop ever. So you tell me what I did wrong or right that year. Now, to caution people, if you're looking at if this is a new process and you don't have your biology built up, I think that's a recipe for disaster. And I'm thinking since I was 15 years into strip till and no till, and probably about 3 or 5 years into the cover crops incorporated into the system, I think that buffered out that stress in the corn crop with a good timing of rain. And like I said, I can't explain. I had the best corn crop ever in my life across all these acres, whether they look stressed or not. So I wouldn't recommend it on a regular basis, but I also know that good soil health can deflect some of these stresses.
Point. The In terms of other factors that can perhaps improve your success with cover crops, whether the goal is the biomass, the roots in the soil, the weed suppression. Where does timing fit in terms of seeding the cover crops, and what have you found to be your, I guess, most successful timing? And we can look at that. We can break that out behind beans, behind corn, behind wheat if you're double cropping. What do you recommend as far as trying to figure out the optimum timing for what works in the northern Midwest? And Pete and Justin, I'll put that to you both.
Well, for me, I think early is best to get it seeded. I've seen the quickest response on a field with a good cool and warm season mix behind a small grain. So obviously, an early to mid-August seeding is very excellent for that. I guess for me, I'm not willing to give up on the maturity of my corn because I can see a 30 bushel swing between mid 90 to 100-day corn versus 105 or 108-day corn. So I'm not trying to get in tight behind that, but I'm also trading that off with early maturity soybeans planted early so that I could be harvesting soybeans in the middle to the third week of September, therefore giving me a start where I can throw in a little oats or a little radish in with the cereal rye and then have something different ahead of corn than just straight cereal rye. And I've seen some good results with that also. So I think you got to pick what works good for you. I've had good yield results with early maturity soybeans planted early, and so I'm leaning that way. And then I'm going late on my corn maturity and getting what I can. And that's part of the soybean thing. It looked a little more straggly or spindly no-tilling my soybeans into that cereal rye. It was smaller, but that's why I let it grow up. I want to give it a little more time in the spring and get a little more growth. Now, 6 feet tall is probably not my goal, but if I can get it knee high before I terminate when you've got soybeans planted, that unless we're getting dry, that's my goal.
Makes sense. Justin, what works for you?
Yeah, I just have to say what Pete said there was, I mean, just the sooner the better. So that's why, like in my presentation, I said we're chasing the combine behind corn harvest to get the rye in. We plant winter wheat in our system and then plant cover crops into that stubble. So I usually plant that after bean harvest and then we move into the rye. But yeah, the earlier the better. The more fall growth you can get, absolutely way better. I'd be curious on the drone situation. You guys, when do you guys recommend trying to put covers out, like during defoliation or sooner?
We worked with a couple people last year, and a couple, said as soon as the bottom leaves turn brown on the beans, it's go time, so it doesn't get too high and get up in the sickle. And then this year we had a couple guys that wanted to put it on really early. So I don't really know. That's kind of why we're going to the local dealer, going through them, because I don't think that's my position to tell somebody when they need to put their cover on, because every area is different. So it just kind of comes with that. When did you plant and what are you looking for? And I don't think we're the right people to answer that question, but
I think we started right around the last week in August last year was our first rye cover crop application. And I know during Labor Day, we had a pretty big job and we got it in right before the rain, and he was seeing that come up that next weekend already and was very impressed with what he was seeing. And that was all applicated in standing corn.
Great. I want to go. Oh, Pete, did you have something you wanted to ask?
I was just going to add to that. I've got my own drone as well and I've tried some, and the last 2 falls I've tried has been dry. So having a good chance to have some rain on it is pretty critical. So part of that plays into that timing. Like they said, when If they got it on right ahead of some rain, it comes right up and it looks awesome. If you're in a dry situation and there's really no rain in the forecast, save the seed. I'm just doing it to see how well the seed's getting spread. Hope I catch enough rain. And it's interesting to see how much hard seed or seed made it through that the crickets didn't all eat or the earthworms pull down. Because in the next year's crop is when you see that stuff coming up then.
I'm gonna ask about the other side of moisture and timing, and that is going back, Pete, to what you were talking about. The role of the cover crop in soaking up moisture and drying out that field a bit when you need it dry. How do you do that? What does that math look like in your head when you're looking at a cover crop out there and you're saying, all right, I want it to continue to pull some moisture out so we get this field where we want it, or uh-oh, things are turning off dry. Time to terminate that cover crop because I don't want it to dry it out excessively. How do you gauge that?
That's a really good question. And part of it is finding a weather service that you kind of trust. Maybe they're using the right models for the year. That's doing a pretty good job of predicting where the weather's going to be, but we all know that that can change. But I look at it in corn termination shortly after corn planting is a good time no matter what. It's done its job. It's gotten you in the field. It's gotten your corn planted. You don't want any competition. In soybeans, it gets to be a different story. Then you're looking at, is it tall enough? Like the early picture where it was shorter when I was no tilling some beans. I wanted to see more biomass so I can skip my pre-emerge residual. I can have more residue hanging out in the top of the field or on top of the soil when you hit the field with the combine. So you've got that food for your microbial population. So you're not having it looking towards your organic matter to feed itself. Um, so it's always a juggling act. And like I said, it's worked good for a decade now. It's just that one spring where we went from wet, wet, wet. We're planting late. I got 3 days to get my corn in, did, and then also we got dumped on with 8 or 10 inches of rain, and then it just flipped on its head. And none of the forecasts I was looking at was looking for hot and dry for that long of a stretch or anything. So um, you do the best you can and you learn and you move on. In that situation, I didn't have a drone yet, but that helped with the decision making to purchase a drone the next year to give me that opportunity to get in there a little sooner. But like I was saying earlier, if it's 30 to 35-mile-an-hour winds every day and your humidity levels are 18 to 22%, the drone's not going to help you a lot either. So.
Yeah, that wind will throw it like a snowball too. Um, Great. Justin, anything to add in terms of how you view moisture or uptake?
No, Pete's right, spot on. It just, yeah, you gotta manage. I have more confidence in if the rye gets away from me now that I can plant and the beans will come through. It was a little nerve-wracking first couple of years, but I'm a little more confident in the system now. But yeah, just timing and extended weather forecasts is what I'll gauge it off of.
Makes sense. Well, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of a busy early spring and for sharing your insights. This has been absolutely great. We will, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be archiving this on the CTIC website. So you'll find it at the address that's on your screen. And we've got one last little thing to plug, and that is the CTIC Conservation in Action Tour, which will be in Raleigh, North Carolina, June 3rd and 4th. The CTIC Conservation in Action Tour is a phenomenal way to look at conservation in action, as we like to say. Really get your hands on it. It's a great opportunity not only to see conservation and talk to the people doing it, but also to talk to the other folks on the bus and at lunch and dinner. The opportunity to share perspectives and meet people from agribusiness, government, regulatory, nonprofits, farmers. It's a tremendous networking chance. So I encourage you to look at ctic.org and get involved and sign up for the tour as well. So again, thank you, everybody, and all the best to everyone for a great planting season.